and welcome to Askew. I'm Phil Taggart. This edition of Askew features the art literary journal Art Life Limited Editions. In 1981, Joe Cardella started a monthly periodically to basically keep in touch and exchange ideas with his arts colleagues internationally. Art Life is a handmade journal that has never missed a deadline and is the longest continuously running artists' periodical in the world. On this edition of Askew, we're going to listen to some of the poets of Art Life and look at some of the artwork. We're also going to get Joe Cardella's take on Art Life.
I started Art Life in January of 1981 while living in Santa Barbara, California, after moving there from San Francisco. And actually the motivation for it was desperation. I came to California in 1974 after receiving a degree in design from Syracuse University and working at the Everson Museum in Syracuse, New York, which was a very contemporary art museum, one of the best in the country at the time. So when I first came out to the West Coast, I was in Berkeley for a year and then moved into San Francisco where I did more museum work. I worked at the Oakland Museum as an exhibit designer for a while and then got into architectural graphics as a commercial field. And after that, being in San Francisco for a few years, it became very frustrating because there was really no place to park in San Francisco.
Oh, to wake up hungry for the world. Can't get enough of computer Chinese food called geek toy goy. Must go to the cafeteria where the odd and interesting are separated by a velvet rope. And the bartender is mixing Buspar spritzes, a frothy anxiety drug, and the back bar mirrors a brain scan imagery reflecting delusional light, and the belly dancers roll flesh up close doing the chicho sinsel, and the young girls squealing at a corner birthday table are wearing anorexia and bulimia buttons, and the maitre d' is a neuropsychologist from Nepal who directs patrons of jaded passions to tables reserved for the antisocial and the paranoid. And the chef has trained at Alba, a specialist in hospital food, sings pain away in parlando, a style of speech, musical direction from a medieval Latin roadhouse where the horns are muted to a whisper as he sings to his dead mother between sips of cooking sherry. And the old waitress lingers before the order bell like Whistler's mother soaking feet, and the busboy is pleasing a dowager beneath the flowing linen of her table as wine trembles on her lips. And there's a quirk for perks, reserved tables for sulky syndromes of the rich, while anguish poor wait for scraps at the tradesman's door. And the stressed out and overextended stand in the takeout line. All present fan menus of kitchen steam, scripting brains and genes, and a ravaging of the salad bar. And the house band plays two notes only, the high exultant and the signature for the low-down dirty blues. But once famished, filled to a stuporous swagger, I go back to the boarding house of the bedridden who shout for canopies of hope, toss on sheets of subclinical conniptions, beat bedpans in mock fury, pry rent money from hook bills of cormorants, yearn for dream pillows of soft fleecy wool of the llama, turn from the steel wool scouring of soul. A little crazy from the pace, stumbling, reaching out for cups of water in the tough man, tough woman run, a continuum of numbness where heroic expectations have no finish line to face.
The fat women in the Coney Island steam bath pinched my cheek and laughed at nothing, sweat gleaming off their skin and coarse curly hair, not a bone to be seen anywhere. not in my aunt's long breasts, none in the flesh of my mother's belly. I grew up in the shelter of kitchen gossip, amplitude nourished by yeasty smells, pillows of soft, rising dough, a feminine language that taught me where the body begins, its armature concealed, its health augmented like good soup. By 6th grade, I knew I was fat. I married a man with a flat stomach and an unrequited hunger. The soup the Nazis fed him in their concentration camp was thin as silk. What floated there, thinner still. From the aunts and mothers I learned wisdom is liquid. Rescue, a recipe they give to their daughters. When the soup is done, I remove the bones, scoop out the glutinous marrow, every last shred. I spread it on fresh rye bread. I watch him eat, and my heart gets fat.
Turning 50. White hairs sprout beneath tinted brown, like a field of poppies after rain, still smelling of mist, sweet coconut shampoo. I part my hair, folding curls to cover this miracle of age. I can't hide it all. The extra bulge around the hips and waist, railroad tracks lining up beneath my eyes, going nowhere, stopping for nothing, wrinkles curling my lip into a frown. Worst is the monthly cycle. I stand naked before the mirror. Will I bleed this month, sweat at night, blush hot in the middle of teaching a class like someone suddenly turned the sun up 100 degrees? I'm too young to be turning 50, I tell myself as I kick the stand from my bike and pedal a 5-mile ride. I should be watching my belly swell with life again, or hitchhiking through Europe, or waiting for my braces to come off and my breasts to grow. This can't be me. 50 is what my mother always was. It's the grouchy old teacher I had for second period, the balding neighbor who scrubbed his car before noon on Sundays, my grandmother who cooked chicken soup and called me from the playground to wash my hands. A passion inside me burns and cools like sunburn beneath ice, like my body when my husband takes his time with me at night, or when I'm walking with my daughter on the beach, or turning pages of poems whose meanings change every time I open them and read.
Made the move down there and became a serious artist for a couple of years, but then realized it was too difficult to transport large, heavy sculpture where it had to go to be seen. So after being forced by real estate once again to relocate more than once, I decided that I would never do anything again that couldn't fit through a mail slot. So that seemed to be the best way to be able to exchange ideas, as I've mentioned before, with other people, especially with conceptual artists, poets, writers, and people who were across the country.
Vermont, California. Before daylight, at the edge of the dew-wet field, a fawn rises on trembling legs from its dry nest to suckle. 3,000 miles away, steady, in the dark of early morning, men and women with names like Osvaldo, Rigoberto, Maria, Maria, Petra, and Luz load crates onto a truck, slowly drive into the graying fields. I have been awake 1 full hour. Oh, this world of innocence and industry. I weep for happiness.
Danger. I have returned to the landscape where I broke open in spring, seen the first toothwort of the season, caught the scent of wild onion and garlic, folded it carefully to safeguard the future. The houses still hold their shape. I have gone to greet the dog who barks his way into dusk. Yesterday, caught in a storm which rose as unexpectedly as passion in middle age, I leaned against the rain into a sky swollen purple, bruised as a girl's shins, when I returned home to reconstruct my life in the aftermath of love. I passed fields welling up with new mustard, like a belly full of heavy cream, stopped by the same stubble of burnt house to inspect the small pile of bricks. Here in the ashes, I spit in the evil eye.
Like a film noir corpse, it is difficult to dispose of. It stands extinguished, dry as a skeleton in a classroom, and as bare without its ornaments. My daughter and I bend it to the floor to loosen the rough wooden cross of the stand, nails groaning, forced free of their hold in the sawn-off trunk. We lay the tree on an old cotton bedsheet, raise and hold its branches upward. With coarse, hairy twine we tie and bind, working in a spiral up its length until it no longer resembles a white weather fir, but a slender cypress, green candle flame on the rolling hills of Tuscany. I snap the top where the angel was, then wrap the tree. Lifting it, I realize how much lighter it has become since we brought it home, cool and full, from its short ride on the roof of the car. I trail needles in the hall as the edge of the sheet loosens and falls, a dropped cape hood exposing what might be a face. And suddenly, I remember when I was 10, holding the body of my dog dead on the twilight beach road shoulder, and how I carried her up the dune, wrapped in the blanket that was her bed, my father leading with flashlight and shovel. I learned then what I relearn now, that lifeless things have such a brittle weight, even a child's arms can accommodate snow on a twig beneath a wintering bird, which stays and stays beyond its season.
Annabelle Lee does a post-mortem on the hazards of romance with a metrical poet. When I told him my name was Annabelle Lee, his face lit up like a Christmas tree. The rhymes were swirling through his head, and I might have known I'd wind up dead, like Ullalum or that weird Lenore. I should have shouted, "Nevermore!" But his verse rolled on like the sounding sea as we strolled, and the cold enfolded me. What carried me off? It was not pneumonia, but simply a case of acute euphonia.
Art life is many things to many people. In December of '80, when I was first putting down my ideas in my sketchbook, originally I envisioned it conceptually as being an actual theater where there would be live performances and readings and other things happening. But it became unreasonable to attempt to put a theater together that was avant-garde in Santa Barbara at that time. So I had to take it one step further, make it more abstract and more affordable. So I realized that I could put it on paper and send it through the mail, which was actually quite advantageous because I was able to get much farther, much faster than by dealing with actual objects and canvases and sculpture and other physical things. The word on the page was very easily transmitted and transported.
Ode to Jackson Wheeler. Old bull of the poetry scene, old mastodon cousin, with follicles by the hundreds and pate hairs by the dozen. Old singer of the ancient feedlot, old leathery mammoth. Long ago you learned you need not answer when he clamored, so don't answer, because here he comes again, riding fast like a cowpoke cutting off a steer, riding like the wind in trees, riding ever nearer. Turn your great brow away from death. Amble on in solitary grace. Chew down these shortened days, these wild late autumn gardens. Old minotaur of the circuit, how could you know we made you our avatar at the city bakery long ago?
The Burning, Camp Eagle, Vietnam, 1972. Before we pushed over our water tower and riddled it with bullets, drenched our hooches with gasoline and strafed them from the air, before we bombed our bunkers and blew up the few trucks left, we swung sledgehammers into typewriter keys, file drawers, and memory graph machines, while our general shot his bulldog and Sergeant Jivant shook while killing wild strays we had taken in. Then we Army bandsmen removed horns from cases, bludgeoned those made of brass, and fed a bonfire with clarinets, oboes, bassoons, and English horns. A couple of men roasted hot dogs, others hummed Spirit of the 101st, and one man laughed and marched around the flames. Calkins asked, "Why can't we take them with us?" Was told there's no room for horns and drums. In my mind, I was back home talking to Brian at City Lights after eating my first artichoke. I was already a ghost, so the fire could not affect my phantom arm, still attached to a bass clarinet. I ran my fingers over the keys as they melted in the fire, afraid to leave that sound behind.
An afternoon of rock and roll. Pluck me with your teeth, baby. Pluck me like Jimi Hendrix plucking his Stratocaster strings. Flick your flames across my body until we're a blazing rock jam, moshing the bed like gorillas on fire, torching the walls as a sacrifice for our love. Let's lick a riff so loud we soar past the sludgy smog layers, over the sun's blood orange, spraying our silhouettes, then shoot like a torpedo straight down into the Atlantic Ocean. Discover unknown sea life and swim with the mermaids hanging out around Atlantis.
Flick that switch, that sexy come touch my lips switch, the hey, why don't you suck my lip, why don't you nibble on my tongue switch, Those eyebrows are like shelves, he said. You could stack books on them. They're solid. I'm restraining myself right now. It's taking a lot for me to remain on this side of the couch. On second thought, you need no switch. I think you're just fine the way you are.
Art life has been on several different continents. It's been cloned on 3 continents, primarily in Germany and Japan. At one time there were 3 or 4 different clones going all at the same time, all of which did not last more than a few years. One by one they just kind of fizzled out. So we remain the original and the longest lasting publication of its type. It's just that artists from other countries would see it or get it in the mail. They'd see it in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and they would look at it and be so impressed they would say, well, we can do this ourselves. So after a couple of years of trying and realizing it was not what they thought it would be, in the area of making money, they usually had gone by the wayside. But we've been collected and archived around the world since the early days of the 80s. And primarily we are collected and archived in major museums and libraries around the country. In California, our only archive and collector would be the Getty in Los Angeles. But in the East, we're collected and archived by Yale, Harvard, Brooklyn Museum, New York Public Library, places like that. And all of these people that I've just mentioned have been subscribing, collecting, and archiving Art Life for at least the past 20 years.
The poem I want to do is inspired by the Beatles' shortest song, Her Majesty. It's the last song at the end of Abbey Road. I'll do it for you real quick. It's real short. Her Majesty's a pretty nice girl, but she doesn't have a lot to say. Bum, 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 bum. Her Majesty's a pretty nice girl, but she changes from day to day. I want to tell her that I love her a lot, but I gotta get a belly full of wine. Her Majesty's a pretty nice girl. Someday I'm gonna make her mine. Oh yeah, someday I'm gonna make her mine. Okay, so that's the song, and this is the poem inspired by it. It's called Her Majesty, after the Beatles. The thing about Her Majesty, you can't trust her. Mercurial as high fashion, about as easy to believe in as the Virgin Mary showing up in fly-speck silhouette on someone's screen porch door. She's reticent too. Ask her a question, she just nods. Try talking current events, she smiles enigmatically. She belongs where you see her most, on coins and postage stamps. It would be grand to court her, a woman who always draws a crowd, confers knighthood with a wave. But you'd never get beyond the palace guard with your sleepy good looks and vinous breath, your propensity for glee.
All the lonely people, where do they all come from? All the lonely people, where do they all belong? Mildred, dost thou believe in ghosts? She said she met Jesus in 1949 sitting on her back porch stool. She said that there are different colors in heaven than we have here on earth, and that one is the shade of a baby's breath. I said to her, Mildred, girl, come back. She said, I'm already in place. She talked about a man that she loved and lost before she could let him go. His name was Arthur Pryor. He was a machine gunner in the World Wars. She said that she couldn't let him go before she lost him. She never met him. After he had died, I realized that Mildred had never seen this man while he was alive or after he had died. Before she left, I said, Mildred, come back. She said, I'm already in place. Before she was gone and after she had left, I heard her voice through the wind in the trees. She said, we got to do good because we want to, not because we got to.
We've had a wide range of people since 1981. People from all walks of life, people from all different media. In the original issue, which was only 4 pages long, one page was dedicated to a cover letter, another was an original poem, another was a graphic, and then I did the cover for that. Was the first issue in January of 1981. And so since then, we've done 258 consecutive monthly issues without ever missing a monthly deadline, which is unheard of in the artist's publication area. And over the years, there have been literally thousands of artists and poets who have passed through the pages of Art Life. And in those 258 issues, we've documented just about every conceivable form of human condition between birth and death and relationships and you name it, it's been documented in Art Life.
Ars post mortem. Vincent saw a starry night. Gauguin saw brown-skinned maids. Lautrec saw ladies dancing. But friends, I am afraid the critics didn't get it. It was just too unique. The style missed the norm, a much too new technique. So genius went a-begging, the world would not be led to credit such originals till after they were dead. Young artist, if you'd prosper now, not be the critic's goat, don't go a-pioneering, do not rock the boat. Go with the flow, be popular, where'er that flow may be. And in a dozen years or so, we'll wonder, who was he?
Hope you enjoyed a look and listen to the Art Life poets and artists. If you'd like more information about Art Life, you can check their website at art-life.com. See you next time on Askew.